Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. My name is Jason Rader and I'll be your host for today's topic, which is secure community connectivity. With us, we have three experts in this area. We have Rob Parsons, Director of Network Security Go-to-Market, Jeremy Nelson, Director of Networking, and Colin Boyce, who is from the city of Tucson, the CIO and acting CTO. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
All right, so why don't we kick it off with, when we're talking about secure community connectivity, that kind of entails a lot of things. There's a technology aspect, there is the motivations for why we did this. And I think, Colin, when we talked earlier, we talked a little bit about the why with the city of Tucson. Why don't you kind of give us a little brief on the why this became a topic of conversation within your org?
Absolutely. So earlier part of the year, right around March, I was in the tri-state area, right around New York City. And, the COVID crisis, we went back home, unfortunately, because my mother-in-law had passed. And the COVID crisis was starting to pick up steam. And we saw, things that was happening in New York City. The death toll was high. And while researching it, I ran across a few articles that said, hey, the COVID crisis is going to impact the poorest hardest. And at that time, my kids transitioned over to telecommuting for school. And thinking about it, I said, well, there's people in Tucson that do not have internet connectivity. And when you look up statistically, major cities that deal with poverty, Tucson and El Paso is kind of at the top of those lists. And so the idea was, how can we do something to benefit the citizens and ultimately benefit the city as well, where it can fit into a broader communication strategy? And we started off with, it was really weird, right? It was wonky, right? We said, hey, we wanted to start off with Wi-Fi because that's ubiquitous and we can do Wi-Fi everywhere, right? And we started to look at the cost and maintenance to do a Wi-Fi project, and 6,000 access points would cover somewhere close to, 20 square miles. And then the maintenance was going to become a nightmare. So we're trying to cover 300 square miles and it just wouldn't scale.
Got it.
So this conversation happened where, I was talking to a buddy of mine. He said, you should look at LTE. I've done LTE stuff. And as the LTE discussion started to pick up steam, we realized getting private signal was going to be impossible. And so we moved to the CBRS model. And as soon as we figured out CBRS was where we're going to go, we engaged with the Insight team, and we plugged in with JMA, we connected Insight and JMA together, and then everything started to come together in a neat package.
Nice. So you've just said a bunch of stuff that I'd love to unpack a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And first of all, I love solving real problems with technology. That is hits me right where I care the most in my life, right? Rob, Jeremy, we've talked about Wi-Fi, we talked about LTE, we've talked about CBRS. Let's kind of unpack those technologies, if you will. Who wants to take a shot at that?
Well, as our RF expert, Rob, you want to dive into Wi-Fi to begin with?
Sure, I'll start. So, you've got a couple different RF technologies that you brought up there. So, Wi-Fi runs in the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum. Doesn't have the power to penetrate a lot of physical infrastructure. You think about brick buildings, or we have a lot of stucco infrastructure in the Southwest. So it has its limitations. CBRS is rather new and is much more aligned to cellular technology. So a lot of times you'll see it referred to as private LTE. And It runs in the 3.5 gigahertz space, so a little bit more resilient to the penetrating of buildings and whatnot from the outside in. So I think that's where Colin and the team wound up looking at the private LTE or the CBRS solution that they wound up with, and ultimately being able to drive that RF into the building. So CBRS is something relatively new. The FCC has gone through the ratification process, and a number of frequencies were purchased by carriers and others, but there's a bulk of the space that's also available for public use. And so that's what they were really able to make use of in this situation. So Jeremy, I know you're super close to what's going on with the project. That's kind of the context of the overall solution, but I know there's more specifics. I'm sure you'd be able to fill us in more.
I'm going to jump in and
Go ahead.
dumb it down, bring it down just one level, right? If you have a fairly large house and you put up a wireless access point, let's say you have a house that's 3,000 square feet, that access point, unless it's directly in the middle, it doesn't hit your whole house, right? We know that you struggle with that. And so the room for error became really tight. Whereas if you start to look at using an LTE type technology, instead of propagation being 150 feet in radius, you're talking about now going close to a mile or two in radius. And so that allows the penetration to be a lot less devices and go a much further distance. And so Rob, I 100% agree with you in what you're saying in your assessment. But I think the practical side of it is, if I was doing this in my house, LTE is not even great at my house, or not LTE, Wi-Fi is not even great to my house to go from one extreme to the other extreme. And LTE allowed me to go a mile or two without having to worry about that. So the room for error in propagation is just easy.
Yeah, and I think
it sounds like it really gave you an edge in scale and the ability to deploy a much more manageable solution. I know we've talked about some numbers of APs, and I think you mentioned some earlier, and the quantity of access points from a Wi-Fi perspective to cover a small area versus what you're able to cover from a range perspective with 5G and CBRS is really incredible.
Yeah, I think another interesting thing to call out there is also the endpoint devices too. So when we think about Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi devices, like you said, it's ubiquitous, right, Colin? Everyone's got a device that connects up to traditional Wi-Fi. But as we think about the traditional architectures and the infrastructures that have supported that, it's just like you said, they've all been close proximities within a specific facility. In fact, lots of technology has been invented or has been put into place within traditional Wi-Fi to help create boundaries on that, not allowing access on that open medium as you transition outside the walls of that particular structure that you're in. So it's really designed around keeping those endpoints inside of a very contained area. It's not about this very broad scale ubiquitous access. And you can even see that in the overall architecture, the radios and the antennas that are built into the endpoint devices too. So while we can, to your point, we can probably overcome some of the challenges with Wi-Fi with stronger radios, different antennas outside, but we then end up with an endpoint issue. Whereas coming back to your point, when we think about CBRS, when we think about cellular, the way that those are architected, they are built for, traveling at high speeds at long distances. And so you have much stronger, more efficient radios inside of our endpoint devices to make sure that we can connect through some of these more obstructed infrastructures and airtime situations. So yeah, I think it's just kind of like a perfect storm, right? When we just think about what each individual technology was built and the use cases that they were originally invented for, it really kind of comes back to your initial premise, and what you found was that cellular RF was going to be much more compatible with your case and being able to deliver the reliable connectivity that you needed to the areas that needed that connectivity.
Yeah, and I think you, when you talked about it before, 6,000 access points for a coverage area versus less than 200. Just by sheer maintenance and management of those devices, you're in a way better situation from a city perspective.
Yeah.
So, you talked about economic, limitations and those kinds of things that were keeping folks who needed to work from home or online schooling and those kinds of things, that was a prime motivation. Was that, is that the phase one? Are there multiple phases in your project? Where do you stand right now with your rollout?
So phase one, we are looking to deploy into the community for connectivity. And what we enjoyed most about this pivot that we did to this LTE technology is the roadmap was a lot more robust. So we said, hey, what can we do with this? Well, if we wanted to do wireless Wi-Fi in parks, I can use the same signal to piggyback so I'm going to take a big step backwards.
Sure.
What we're delivering to the house, right? So what the end user experience is going to be, they're going to get a device, we call them MiFi devices. They're going to get a ruggedized MiFi device inside of their house, delivered by, it's, built and delivered by the Insight team. But Sierra Wireless is the manufacturer. So we wanted something rugged that we can put in the house. And that converts this LTE signal, like a radio transmitter, into Wi-Fi signal that you would typically use at home. Okay. Well, we could take that same architecture now, and I can put that on a pole in a park and convert that same LTE signal to Wi-Fi in my parks. I could do it at traffic signals. And now I'm able to take a technology that is ubiquitous and something that we have in the back end that we're building and use it as kind of a front end, back end type infrastructure in order to connect to my citizens. So phase one was, hey, let's get this out with the citizens. We're already experimenting with using this on city buses where they'll connect and we'll provide Wi-Fi inside of buses. We're now experimenting with, what if we deploy this device inside of a park or at a traffic signal, and now we can provide regular Wi-Fi signals throughout the city, and we're not maintaining the same number of devices. We could be very strategic on how we do the Wi-Fi signal. We're talking about and experimenting with taking city-owned devices like iPads and popping that in and allowing people to be able to connect and piggyback against that same signal. We're experimenting with cell phone technology and seeing, hey, is this something that we really want to do? How does this work out? And so we're doing a lot of little things where my research and development team is trying a ton of things. But probably the largest thing that we're looking to focus on is the Smart City Initiative. Being able to get the backhaul to connect parking meters and water infrastructure and you name it. There's an endless number of opportunities where we can deploy sensors to check everything from, are we running a green environment, to SCADA devices all on the same network, and we can leverage it. And so this is a unique win-win-win. I purposely added that third win proposition that we can do. And so we were really excited about it because I'm helping the citizens. I'm helping the departments inside of the city deliver services to the citizens. But last but not least, I'm able to do a cost avoidance with certain budgetary items going forward in the future because now it's my network. And instead of adding or paying a cell bill for all these sensors throughout the city, I'm doing it on my infrastructure and it's riding with me.
I love that. So from my perspective in working with, municipalities and that, there's a lot of different initiatives that go on, fire department, parks and rec, there's all these different areas. And as the CIO, and also linking into other initiatives, federal initiatives as well, coming with a solution where you really wanted to kind of identify a certain area of the population where you wanted to help, but be able to provide technology solutions that allow everybody to kind of get better. And then now looking towards, roadmap wise where you can go. So I think it's a brilliant that, from where you were from a, poverty level, like you started off with, to where you can go from a technology and capability level, takes you to the whole next level. That's a giant leap. And I think I love those kinds of initiatives with technology.
Yeah. I would say the other thing that's really exciting for me, right, is being in Tucson, When I first came here, people said I moved to the great state of Maricopa, right? Because Maricopa County, Phoenix is the big player in the state. But now, the other cool win that we have is Tucson, in partnership with the players that we have, we're now on the map with doing something that's really innovative, really creative. And we're fostering deeper relationships with our partners, our citizens, departments. And so this IT department that is, 100 people is now providing world-class solutions where, it's unexpected. And it's just an exciting proposition.
Yeah, and Colin, I think one of the things that I have been the most intrigued and just honored to be a part of up until this point was hearing you talk a little bit about what that digital divide really means, right? So, you highlighted, I think, touched on it, but I would love to hear your perspective, because what you guys are building is an investment in your community, right? Yeah. Is that you're focusing on students today, you're building the citizens of tomorrow, but then you're also using that exact same investment, that exact same infrastructure to build out a smart city that will continue to attract companies, opportunities, and jobs to help leverage that newly skilled community that you've helped enable through this technology. That really, it just kind of touched me personally, especially hearing the way that you've explained that before in the past.
So I'm going to step backwards and tell you why I'm passionate about this project, and then I'm going to plug it into citizens. My mom and my family moved from a small island in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, and I grew up in a little town called Brooklyn. And when we came here, we were poor. And when I say poor, my mom probably had $200, $300 in her pocket when we came up from Trinidad. And we were growing up in Brooklyn, New York, and we scraped to get by. And what my mom did with us was she sent us to summer programs to learn computers. And today, it's 4 of us. 3 of us are in the IT industry, and the black sheep of the family is a neurosurgeon in Grand Rapids. And the computer programs that she invested, those learning opportunities that she invested that were free in New York City, is what allowed us to be successful today. And for me, what we're doing in partnership with the public-private partnerships that we're doing is we're providing an opportunity to have other success stories like Colin, right? While we understand there's a 3-legged stool that we have to work through, which is connectivity is one thing. There's the training, the device piece that we have to work through, and there's the training piece. Now we're allowing that flexibility for people to be able to connect. And so what the city of Tucson is dedicated with is, while we may not be able to drive all of the solutions, we want to be part of that conversation to help in partnership with the players that we have today. And so, yeah, the focus is very much the citizens. We want to be able to get the citizens and provide that opportunity. The education portion of this network is the largest part of it. And we really want to connect with our citizens and be able to do that in a meaningful way. And for me, there's no greater success story that, 10 years out, if someone says, hey, look, if it wasn't for the free connectivity that I got, I wouldn't have been able to attend this program or that program. And now I am this because of that program. And to me, technology is just a tool that we use to help one another. And I believe that's why we are here.
I love that. I love that. I mean, when you think about the pandemic, I know we kind of let off with a little bit of that pandemic conversation as it kind of hit you and you started doing your research, Colin. But, a lot of the data, a lot of the information that we've seen as the past few months have progressed is that technology has really been what's able to hold our society, been able to hold our economy together. Because without it, I mean, if this were to have happened back in the 1990s, I mean, it's hard to imagine what our society would actually look like today. So yeah, I think what you're saying hits really close to home, because some of us have been very, very privileged. We have technology in our homes. We've been able to continue to work, to operate. Our kids are continuing to get that education that you referred to that is so valuable. but to be able to now extend that to families that may have otherwise not been included in that, I think is extremely important.
And from a technology perspective, we mentioned the term, the smart city kind of aspect. What is that? What are the components of that besides the CBRS and the technology devices? When have we arrived at smart city? What's that roadmap look like?
So the roadmap around the smart cities thing is still being fleshed out. But what we're lining up is the city of Tucson has some unique challenges, right? Being in a warmer climate, and we have a significant homeless population. And so we're looking for solutions on helping us manage and to take care of those people that are in the community. Traffic is also a major issue, right? And so coordinating traffic signals and being able to connect them in a meaningful way. If you think about parking, even something as simple as parking, right, around transportation, people spend an enormous amount of time trying to find a parking spot. And being able to tie in with smart city solutions where we can help facilitate that. Working on things like water quality. And then there's even little things like Parks and Rec, right, where you can pull up an app and see what's the temperature of the water in the pool. There's meaningful things that we can do to enhance the citizens' experience, right? And the goal really is, while we're building this, and some of this has an internal department play, really it's just we're plumbing it back in where we want to make things better for the citizens in Tucson. And we want to make our community attractive for new businesses that want to build in the area. And candidly, this project, here is an unintended win in this project, right? We didn't expect this to happen, but as we're starting to build this out, some of the telecommunications providers are not happy that we're doing this. But what they're doing is they're providing more services for our citizens. They're saying, hey, look, during the pandemic, we're going to increase your bandwidth that we're giving you. We're going to make it free for a little bit longer, or we're going to make it $10 a month and you're going to get 30 megs or 50 megs or whatever the case may be. And they're stepping up, and as partners, co-opetition, right? With that co-opetition model that we're banking on, it's really helping out where the citizens come out at the top, which is why we're here.
And from a tech perspective, what are some of the things that folks have to think about, Jeremy, Rob, Colin as well, that that are the components of this? Is it more than just the CBRS and the bridge between that network and the Wi-Fi that we have to think about?
So I think a thing, something that I really wanted to kind of highlight as we've been going through this, and it's it's in the title of our session today, right? That secure community connectivity. It's the secure piece, right? I think that's another unique benefit that comes to the table when we start talking about this CBRS solution that Colin and his team have selected and are deploying right now, is that it does, when we think about these smart cities, when we think about some of the devices that Colin and his team are talking about deploying, that really get challenging when we talk about deploying that to a traditionally public network like the internet and using public types of connectivity. Bringing in something around like this CBRS technology, which is inherently very, very secure. It requires levels of authentication, authorization. You have to have physical tokens in order to be able to get connected. So I think the security piece of that is really, really compelling, as well as we think about some of the things that we can now extend to these communities to help not only bridge the gaps, but the last thing we probably want to do, Colin, and I would imagine you'd agree with me, is to increase their risk profile, just because we're providing them with a fix to one problem and then creating another problem for them down the road. So I think that's another one that for me is a pretty important technology consideration when we're thinking about this particular approach that the city of Tucson's taken.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Colin, SCADA networks, and typically when I'm talking SCADA and we're also talking about public access, we wouldn't be talking about those things being in the same environment, right? So obviously the security concerns are something that we care a lot about from this.
I agree, and you'll see it, right? The same LTE network or wireless network that you use, right, the police officers use, and they use aggressive preempting. And so the security component is already built in. To quote from the old Prego commercial, it's in the sauce, right? It's already in the sauce. And so it makes it easier for us to do that type of deployment. To piggyback on we pride ourselves in the city of Tucson to being one of the most secure cities. We spend a lot of time monitoring what we look like, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't build something that would put the city operations in jeopardy. And so what we did was we built a totally different network. There is strategic connections where we have it protected and firewalled, but our connection to the internet is diverse. It's not connected to the city of Tucson's network at all. It's different firewalls, different routers, everything is different. And we did that by design because we wanted it to be a totally different network that's riding its own fiber path and it's not connected to us at all. Other things that I think that we had to address with is we wanted to do a phased deployment. So while we're doing this deployment and we're potentially tackling 5,000 people and we can have 40,000 people expanded on the network, it's still an alpha project, right? It's at the early stages of it. And we wanted to do that because we wanted to take an agile approach to deployment. We know that there's going to be tweaking on this network. When we sat down and said we wanted to build this network in 4 to 5 months to get citizens connected, I've had vendors hang up the phone and said, no way. It was not going to happen. The Insight team embraced the concept of that happening and, the partners that we're working with. So we are doing it. But I'm not under the delusion that it's going to be 100%, next week. What we're realizing is there's going to be people coming up and they're going to be tuning and tweaking, and there's going to be small amount of changes that's going to pay huge dividends. And we're going to work through that. We're going to find holes in our coverage, and there's a roadmap where we're going to prioritize and we're going to take care of that. And those are the things that you are going to have to tackle with a deployment this size. Other big things that we figured out was we're not given headcount to support this network. And so partnering with someone who does have that and has a support model so we can get baselines was extremely important to us. Because you deploy 5,000 devices, if 5,000 people call in, that's a bad day.
No, I agree. I think, you definitely touched on something that I think is a strength, that when people embrace the new technology, somebody's got to be that trendsetter, the trailblazer, right? And sharing that knowledge of what goes down. I think that's something that everybody on the phone kind of believes in as well, right? There's always a risk with a newly ratified standard, taking a new approach, leveraging new vehicles. That's always going to be a little bit problematic. But when you're driven by passion and you're trying to solve a problem that you really care a lot about, that's where you can get that drive. And then again, one of the questions I wanted to pose to you as, for other CIOs and other CTOs that are out there, what are some things that you can give words of encouragement or tips on for those guys out there that are wanting to embark on this same journey? So
I would say for any CIO, CTO that's approaching this, it's a complex problem with lots of moving pieces. Start small. Start with assets that you already own and get some easy wins. When we started off the project, we were looking at, deploying at city locations and, it'd be this astronomical lift that we're doing. And we said, wait a minute, we have fiber poles and assets that already exist that's out there. Let's start there. And let's keep the major construction piece to a minimum. And I would say start with the easy wins where you can get that and have your coverage maps. Get your data scientist people involved, get some community excitement with it. Get your web people involved where people can search it. Use all of the people in your arsenal. Second thing that I found that made us successful in this project was the partnerships with my contemporaries. Being able to pick up the phone and speak to, the people who are doing the permits or doing some of the other stuff, and having a regular touch-base cadence meeting with them as things were matriculating through the process made it easy for us to catch things that were stuck. And that's huge, right? That's huge. So building something this fast, this big, at the time frame that you have, you don't need the complexity of, arm wrestling with departments. That cadence allowed us to get things done and find problems quicker than we would have normally. And so, candidly, I'm proud of my team. I'm proud of the Insight team and the quality of project that we're running, because we did something that everyone thought was impossible, and we made it possible.
I love that. You talked about some themes that we have pretty much throughout every one of these that we do. When we're talking about a successful project, it's talking about, don't try to boil the ocean, get some quick successes, learn from that. And also, what we're finding a lot when we're working with our partners these days is when it's something that benefits multiple entities within the organization and you get everybody on board. We often talk about influence without authority when you're trying to get something done and you're having to use that influence of, hey, here's how it's going to make everybody's life better, or those kinds of elements are what typically is the earmark of a successful project, excuse me. And, those are the kinds of, I love it when everything kind of comes back to the things that we say over and over again, that, you get people that you trust, even if it's impossible, we say the impossible is possible, just takes a little bit longer, right? It's one of those things, and you just don't stop. And I think, I love the fact that those successes that you're having in the city of Tucson align with the successes that we have in other areas because of the same elements. So I love how that kind of comes full circle back to that.
Although,
Jeremy,
I'll say this one thing, Jason. I think we need to add a new one to that list. Reuse what you already have. Having worked with Colin so closely, that was such a big deal. Like I know he kind of mentioned that as an aside, but that really, really was a tremendous kind of foresight that Colin and his team had, is that they already had facilities with the necessary connectivity in the communities that they wanted to reach. And so being able to leverage that and limit the construction, which we know is the longest tent pole in projects like this. It's not usually the technology that's the limiter, it's the construction. So I think we see that in a lot of other projects and a lot of other things that we talk about. Reuse what you've already got. Not everything needs to be new.
Right. And you're trying to maximize the distance of the project. And I'm sitting here and thinking, my youngest son came to me this morning, and I was talking to my wife about this event and this project. And my son made a statement. He said, Dad, the distance is equal to work divided by the force, right? And so how much we are able to accomplish in this project was the work we have to do, right? Because we know the work we have to do. And then the involvement, the executive involvement, having right project managers, the right leadership, the engagement, and putting that pressure from both the community, from the city's manager's office, from my level, to say, we're going to do this. And failure is not an option, is why we have the distance and the mileage that we have. My son is brilliant.
He is. We'll have him on next time. Yeah, for sure. No, I think those are perfect words to kind of close it up with. I mean, I think, Colin, thanks for sharing the story. I think, what we've kind of shown here is that with the passion, with a good cause, with leveraging what you've got on the truck and understanding the benefit that it has, not only to the initiative and what you're trying to accomplish, from regardless of the project, but how it benefits those people anecdotally as you go along, and then understanding what that vision is and the tertiary steps that it takes, bringing in the right folks to help you, augment your team. nothing but success ahead of you. So we appreciate you sharing your journey with us.
I'm going to share one last point because I think we're coming towards the end.
Sure.
What we did was we redefined success. And when you're taking on a project this size, you have to have a definition of success. And when we started off is success having every radio, every person connected at the end of the project? And the answer is no. That's not how I'm defining success. Success is for us in this project in the city of Tucson is that we have infrastructure that we can leverage to do things in the future. And think about it, right? We're using CARES dollars, a hybrid of CARES dollars to do it. That is an amazing proposition, right? Where else would we get an infusement of $5 million to do something like this? And so any element, if we are able to get to 80% of the goals that we mapped out in this project, we're successful. We're successful and we're excited by it, right? You know, because we're CBRS, penetration through walls is a little bit harder, and we discovered a lot of little things along the way, but we're still successful.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much. And Jeremy, Rob, thanks for helping out. And we hope that you'll report back into us, Colin, and give us as you continue to be successful in this journey and the whole secure community and smart city effort that you're going through in the city of Tucson. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all for having me. It's been a pleasure joining the team.
Thank you. If you'd like to know more about what we do here at Insight CDCT, feel free to look for us on the web at insightcdct.com. Thanks and have a great day.